The mahogany chess set sat between us like a declaration of war. My brother Marcus's laughter still echoes in that conference room, bouncing off the walls like shattered glass. $14 million in tech stocks for me, and Emily gets a dusty board game? He'd actually wiped tears from his eyes, the kind that come from laughing too hard, not from grief over our father who'd been buried just 3 days earlier. I remember staring at that chess set, my fingers tracing the intricate carved knights, while everyone in the room, lawyers, accountants, distant relatives who'd crawled out of the woodwork, all tried to hide their pity behind polite coughs and shuffled papers. What they didn't know, what even I didn't know in that moment, was that my father had been playing a game 23 years in the making. And that chess set? It wasn't just his final move, it was his checkmate. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child, the one who got left behind while everyone else got their golden tickets, then you need to hear what happened next. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the smallest inheritance holds the biggest secret. My name is Emily Hartwell, though for most of my life, I was just Marcus's little sister, or Richard Hartwell's other child. You know how some families have a golden child? Marcus wasn't just golden, he was platinum, diamond-encrusted, limited edition. At 28, he'd already been running 3 of Dad's companies, his face plastered on the covers of business magazines with headlines like The Heir Apparent and Following in Giant Footsteps. Me? I was 23, fresh out of art school with a degree Dad called an expensive hobby, working at a small gallery that paid barely enough to cover my studio apartment in the worst part of the city. The reading of the will was supposed to be a formality. Everyone knew Marcus would get everything. He'd been groomed for it since he could walk. Dad had him in boardrooms at 12, teaching him about hostile takeovers while other kids were learning multiplication tables. I was the afterthought, the artistic one who Dad would pat on the head at family dinners before turning back to Marcus to discuss quarterly projections. Emily Marie Hartwell, the lawyer had read, his voice cutting through my memories. You shall receive your father's personal chess set, the one from his study, along with all pieces and the accompanying leather-bound journal. That's when Marcus lost it. His laughter had started as a snicker, then grew into full-bodied guffaws that made his shoulders shake. A chess set? Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. I knew Dad didn't really, but this is just cruel. He'd turned to the lawyer. There must be some mistake. Surely there's something else. Some bonds, a trust fund, even a car? The lawyer had adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable. The will is quite specific, Mr. Hartwell. Your sister receives the chess set and journal. Nothing more. Marcus's wife, Patricia, hadn't even tried to hide her smirk. She'd leaned over to whisper something to her sister, both of them eyeing my second-hand dress like it was contaminating the leather chairs. The accountant had actually winced. Dad's business partner, Mr. Chen, had looked away entirely. But here's the thing about being the forgotten child. You learn to see things others miss. You become an observer, a student of shadows and silence. And in that moment, while everyone was either laughing or pitying me, I noticed something odd. Mr. Whitman, Dad's oldest friend and his personal lawyer for 40 years, wasn't looking at me with pity. He was watching me with something else entirely. Anticipation, maybe. Or was it respect? The chess set is in your father's study, he'd said quietly, sliding a key across the table to me. He was very specific that you should collect it yourself, alone. Growing up in the Hartwell household was like being a ghost in your own life. Dad built his empire from nothing, started with a single electronics store when he was 25 and turned it into a technology conglomerate worth hundreds of millions. By the time I was born, he was already a legend in Silicon Valley. Marcus was 5 then, already being molded into the perfect heir. I have this memory from when I was 7. Dad had brought home this enormous chess set made of marble, not the mahogany one I'd inherit, but a different one, ostentatious and cold. He'd set it up in the living room and called Marcus and me over. Chess, he'd announced, is the perfect metaphor for business. Every move has a consequence. Every piece has a purpose. Marcus, you'll be playing white." "What about Emily?" Marcus had asked, though even at 12, he'd sounded more obligated than interested. Dad had looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in months. "Emily will watch. She needs to learn that in this world, there are players and there are spectators." I'd sat on the carpet for 3 hours watching them play. Dad explained every move to Marcus, every strategy, every sacrifice. When I'd asked if I could try, Dad had ruffled my hair and said, "Chess isn't for everyone, sweetheart. Why don't you go draw something pretty?" That became our dynamic. Marcus in Dad's study, learning about leveraged buyouts. Me in my room, sketching. Marcus at board meetings. Me at art class. Marcus getting a Porsche for his 16th birthday. Me getting a used Honda Civic for mine, which, don't get me wrong, I was grateful for, but the difference was impossible to ignore. The worst part? Marcus wasn't even mean about it, not intentionally. He was just oblivious. He'd grown so accustomed to being the sun in our family's solar system that he didn't notice I was barely Pluto. "You're so lucky," he'd told me once during college. "No pressure, no expectations. You can just be whatever you want." What I wanted to tell him was that being whatever you want is hard when your father doesn't even come to your high school graduation because Marcus had a business presentation the same day. It's hard when every family dinner becomes a board meeting where you're not even on the agenda. It's hard when your own mother, before she died when I was 15, would introduce you as Marcus's sister before remembering to add your name. Mom. God, I missed her. She'd been the only one who really saw me. She'd hung my paintings in the kitchen, came to every art show, saved every sketch. When she got sick, pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal, she'd held my hand in the hospital and whispered, "You have your father's mind, Emily. He just doesn't know it yet." I'd wanted to believe her, but after she died, Dad retreated even further into his work, and Marcus became not just the favorite son, but the only son. I might as well have been furniture. There was one exception to Dad's indifference, the mahogany chess set in his study. It was the only thing in that room I was allowed to touch. He'd gotten it from his father, my grandfather, who I'd never met. Sometimes when Dad was traveling and Marcus was at his prep school, I'd sneak into the study and just hold the pieces. They were hand-carved, warm to the touch, each one a tiny masterpiece. The kings weren't just kings, they were warriors with actual expressions of determination. The queens looked fierce, powerful. Even the pawns had personality. Once, Dad caught me. I was 16, and I'd set up the board, playing against myself. I'd frozen, expecting him to yell, but instead, he'd stood in the doorway, watching. "Do you know how to play?" he'd asked. "I taught myself," I'd admitted, "from books and watching you and Marcus." He'd moved into the room, sat across from me. For one magical hour, we played. He didn't let me win, didn't go easy on me, but he also didn't lecture. We just played. I lost, but I'd made him work for it. "You play like your grandfather," he'd said when it was over. "Patient, observant. You see the whole board, not just the immediate moves." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given me about anything other than my art. But the next day, it was like it never happened. He was back to his empire, Marcus was back from school, and I was invisible again. The family dinners were the worst. Every Sunday, unless Dad was traveling, we'd gather at the massive dining table that could seat 20, but usually just held the 4 of us. Dad, Marcus, Patricia, after they got married, and me. "The Morrison acquisition is moving forward," Marcus would announce, cutting into his steak with the same precision he used to dissect companies. "Excellent," Dad would respond. "Remember, the key is to make them think it's their idea. What about the patents?" "Already transferred. Legal cleared everything. Yesterday." They'd go on like this through soup, salad, main course, dessert. Patricia would chime in occasionally. She worked in Marcus's main company as CFO, because of course she did. They were the power couple, the perfect pair to take over the empire. And me? I'd sit there, moving food around my plate, occasionally mentioning something about the gallery, a new artist we were featuring, a piece I was working on. The response was always the same. "That's nice, dear," from Patricia, a grunt from Marcus, and nothing from Dad. Except once. About 6 months before he died, I'd mentioned that one of my paintings had sold, not for much, $500, but it was my first sale to someone who wasn't a friend or family member. Dad had looked up from his plate. "Someone paid money for your art?" "Yes," I'd said, trying not to sound defensive. "A collector from New York. She saw it online and—" "500?" Marcus had interrupted, laughing. "Emily, I make that in the time it takes to brush my teeth." "Marcus," Dad had said sharply, and for a moment I thought he was going to defend me, but then he'd continued, "Don't be crude about money. It's beneath us." That was our family. Marcus counting his millions, Dad building his empire, Patricia planning their dynasty, and me selling a painting for what they spent on a single bottle of wine. But there were moments, tiny, fleeting moments, when I thought Dad saw me. Like when I'd catch him looking at one of Mom's paintings I'd restored, a soft expression on his face. Or when he'd stand in the doorway of his study while I was sketching in the living room, watching me work with an intensity I couldn't understand. The last time I saw him alive was 2 weeks before his heart attack. I'd stopped by the house to pick up some old art supplies from my room. He was in his study, the mahogany chess set spread out before him, but he wasn't playing. He was just staring at it. "Dad?" I'd said softly. He'd looked up, and for a second, he seemed surprised to see me. Then his expression had shifted to something I'd never seen before. Regret? Sadness? "Emily," he'd said. "Come here." I'd walked over, stood beside his chair. He'd picked up the white king, turned it over in his hands. "Your grandfather gave me this set when I was about your age," he'd said. "Said it would teach me everything I needed to know about life." "Did it?" He'd been quiet for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "It taught me about sacrifice, about strategy, about thinking 10 moves ahead." He'd set the king down, picked up a pawn. "But perhaps it didn't teach me everything." Before I could ask what he meant, Marcus had burst in, all energy and excitement about some merger, and Dad's attention had shifted like it always did. I'd left them there, talking about millions and markets, not knowing it would be the last time. The heart attack happened at his desk. Massive. Instant, the doctors said. He was gone. Before anyone could even call an ambulance. Marcus had been the one to find him, early in the morning, slumped over his computer. The last thing on his screen had been an email to his lawyer, Mr. Whitman, with the subject line, "Everything is in place." The funeral was a who's who of Silicon Valley. Tech giants, politicians, business moguls, all coming to pay their respects to Richard Hartwell, the man who'd built an empire from nothing. Marcus gave the eulogy, of course. It was polished, professional, perfect. He talked about legacy and vision and continuing the Hartwell name. I'd wanted to speak, had even written something about the father I'd glimpsed in quiet moments. The man who'd kept every one of my childhood drawings in a box in his closet. I'd found them while looking for a black dress for the funeral. But when the time came, Marcus had simply forgotten to call me up, and I hadn't had the strength to fight for it. Not then. Patricia had actually had the audacity to suggest I skip the reception. "It's really for Dad's business associates," she'd said, her hand on my arm in what she probably thought was a comforting gesture. "You'd be so bored with all the shop talk." But I'd gone anyway, drifting through the crowd like I'd drifted through family dinners, invisible and unnecessary, until Mr. Chen had found me by the bar. "Your father was very proud of you," he'd said quietly. I'd almost laughed. "No, he wasn't. You didn't see it, but he was. He kept a photo of your first gallery showing in his desk drawer, looked at it often." Before I could process that, Marcus had appeared, all false concern and practiced sympathy. "Emily, there you are. We need to discuss the estate. Obviously, Dad would want the family home to stay with the company, but we'll make sure you get something for your apartment situation." That's when I'd realized he already knew. Somehow, he'd already known what was in the will. 3 days later, sitting in that conference room, watching him laugh at my chess set inheritance, I understood that Marcus hadn't just won, he'd been declared the winner before the game even started, or so we all thought. The key to Dad's study felt heavier than it should have as I stood outside the door. The house was empty. Marcus and Patricia were probably already at the office, calculating their new net worth. The housekeeper had been given the week off. It was just me and the ghosts of a lifetime of being overlooked. Dad's study hadn't been touched since his death. His coffee cup still sat on the desk, a ring of dried coffee at the bottom. His reading glasses were folded neatly on top of a stack of contracts. And there, on the side table by his leather chair, sat the mahogany chess set. It was set up mid-game, as if Dad had been playing someone. I recognized the position. It was from a famous match, Kasparov versus Karpov, 1984. But something was off. The pieces weren't quite right. Some were in impossible positions, places they couldn't have gotten to following the rules of chess. The leather journal sat beside the board. Dad's handwriting covered the first page. Emily, if you're reading this, then everything has proceeded as planned. The chess set is yours as it should be, as it was always meant to be. Your grandfather would be proud. Now, look closer at the board. The answer isn't in the game, it's in the pieces themselves. My hands trembled as I picked up the white king. It was heavier than it should be, and when I turned it over, I noticed a tiny seam around the base. I twisted it, and it opened like a secret compartment. Inside was a small key, no bigger than my thumbnail, and a piece of paper with numbers, 42, 17, 33. One by one, I checked every piece. Each one that was in an impossible position had a compartment. The queen held another key. The bishop had a bank routing number. The knight contained a safety deposit box number. The rooks had addresses. Even the pawns held secrets. One had a photograph of a building I didn't recognize. Another had what looked like a legal document shrunk down to fit. The journal explained everything, page by page, in Dad's meticulous handwriting. But it wasn't the cold, businesslike writing I was used to seeing on his contracts. This was personal. This was a father talking to his daughter. I know you think I didn't see you, Emily. That's what I needed everyone to think. Marcus included, especially Marcus. But I saw everything, every painting, every sketch. Every moment you thought you were alone, I was watching, and I was planning. Your brother is not who you think he is. Neither am I. This chess set isn't just an inheritance. It's a test, a puzzle. And if you're the person I believe you to be, it's your future. The keys open a safety deposit box at First National Downtown Branch. Box 1847. Inside, you'll find documents that will change everything you thought you knew about our family's fortune. But be careful. Once you open that box, there's no going back. Your grandfather once told me that in chess, as in life, the most powerful piece isn't always the one everyone's watching. Sometimes it's the pawn quietly making its way across the board that becomes the queen. You were never forgotten, Emily. You were protected, hidden, saved for the right moment. This is that moment. The building in the photograph, I bought it 20 years ago, put it in a trust that Marcus knows nothing about. It's yours. It's been generating income all this time, managed by Mr. Whitman. The account numbers? They access offshore accounts I've been feeding for 2 decades. Legal, but invisible. But that's not the real inheritance. The real inheritance is what Marcus doesn't know about his $14 million in stocks. Those companies? I've been slowly, carefully, legally undermining them for 3 years. Every one of them has fatal flaws that will become apparent within the next 6 months. Lawsuits I've been secretly documenting, patents that will expire, contracts with poison pills, technologies that will be obsolete the moment a competitor I've been funding through shell companies in your name, goes public. Marcus got $14 million in stocks that will be worth less than your chess set within a year. But you, Emily, you own the competitors. You own the patents that will replace his. You own the future while he's holding on to a past that's about to crumble. Mr. Whitman has been instructed to guide you through everything, but only if you solve the chess set puzzle. Only if you prove you're the strategic thinker I know you are. He's been watching you, waiting for this moment, just as I have. There's more. So much more. But first, you need to go to the safety deposit box. Inside, you'll find 3 things. A letter from your grandfather you've never met, explaining why he insisted I play this long game, documentation of every illegal and unethical thing Marcus has done in the past 5 years, and yes, I know about all of it, and contact information for the CEO of Novatech Industries, a company nobody knows I founded, a company I've built in secret, a company that's about to revolutionize the entire tech industry. That CEO, she's been waiting to hear from you. She only knows you as the heir, because that's what you are, Emily, not Marcus. You. Your brother was given every advantage, every opportunity, every lesson. And what did he do with them? He became exactly what I expected. Greedy, short-sighted, cruel. He takes credit for others' work. He cuts corners. He betrays partners. I've watched it all, documented it all, and I've let him do it because I needed him to show his true nature. But you, given nothing, ignored, overlooked, you became an artist. You see beauty where others see nothing. You create where others destroy. You learned patience from neglect, strategy from survival, and empathy from isolation. You became everything I hoped you would be, everything your grandfather saw in you the one time he met you. You were only 2, you don't remember, but he held you and told me, "This one has the gift. Hide her until she's ready." I'm sorry, Emily. Sorry for the years of coldness, the missed birthdays, the ignored achievements. Every instinct I had screamed to embrace you, to celebrate you. But I couldn't. If Marcus had seen you as competition, he would have destroyed you. He's destroyed everyone he's seen as a threat. You don't know about the 3 executives he's driven to bankruptcy, the partner he framed for embezzlement, the whistleblower whose life he ruined. But I do. It's all documented in that safety deposit box. So I made you invisible. I made him comfortable. I let him think he'd won a game you weren't even playing. Until now. The chess set was my father's, and his father's before him. It's been in our family for over a century, passed not to the oldest or the most obvious heir, but to the one who could see the whole board, the one who could play the long game, the one who could sacrifice everything for the perfect checkmate. That's you, Emily. It was always you. I sat in Dad's chair, the journal trembling in my hands, tears streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, validation, fury, all of it maybe. I looked at the chessboard again, seeing it differently now. The impossible positions weren't random. They spelled out something in chess notation. When I worked it out, it was coordinates, GPS coordinates. I grabbed Dad's laptop, still open on his desk, and typed them in. They led to a warehouse in the industrial district. According to the property records, it was owned by a company called Knights Gambit LLC. The incorporation documents showed it was founded 23 years ago, the day I was born. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Hey, Em. Listen, I feel bad about earlier. The whole chess set thing. Tell you what, I'll give you $50,000 for it. Call it a family heirloom payment. That should help with your rent situation, right? I almost laughed. He had no idea what he was really asking for. That's generous, Marcus, but I think I'll keep it. Sentimental value, you know? Sentimental? Be practical for once. $50,000 is more than you make in a year at that gallery. Maybe, but some things are worth more than money. He sighed, that condescending big brother sigh I'd heard 1,000 times. Fine, but when you're struggling to make rent, don't come crying to me. I've got companies to run now. Real responsibilities. I understand. Good luck with those companies, Marcus. Luck? He laughed. I don't need luck. I've got $14 million in blue-chip tech stocks. I'm set for life. After he hung up, I sat there for a moment, looking at the chess set. Then I picked up the white pawn from E2, the one that had started the game, and opened its hidden compartment. Inside was a business card, Whitman and Associates, Private Wealth Management. On the back, in Mr. Whitman's handwriting, "When you're ready." I called the number. "Miss Hartwell," Mr. Whitman answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting by the phone. "I assume you've found your father's journal? How long have you known?" 23 years, since the day you were born, and your grandfather made your father promise to protect you from what Marcus would become. And what is that? A cautionary tale, Miss Hartwell. Shall we meet? There's quite a bit to discuss, and I believe you'll want to visit that warehouse before your brother realizes something is amiss. The warehouse was massive, taking up an entire city block. From the outside, it looked abandoned, windows painted over, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. But the key from the chess set's queen opened a side door, and what I found inside took my breath away. It wasn't a warehouse. It was a laboratory, a state-of-the-art research and development facility hidden in plain sight. Scientists in lab coats moved between workstations. Prototypes of devices I couldn't even identify lined the walls. And in the center of it all, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes was waiting. "Emily," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. Your father hired me 15 years ago to build the future. We've been waiting for you." All of this, what is it? Novatech Industries. On paper, we don't exist yet. But in 6 months, when we go public, we'll be worth approximately 10 times what your brother's stocks are worth today. Your father owned 100% of it, through a series of trusts and shell companies. Now you do. She led me through the facility, showing me innovations that made my head spin. Quantum processors that made current technology look like stone tablets. Medical devices that could detect cancer years before current methods. Clean energy solutions that could revolutionize the industry. Your father funded all of this? With money your brother never knew existed. Richard was brilliant at hiding assets in plain sight. Every time Marcus bragged about a deal, your father was quietly investing the real profits elsewhere. In you. But why? Why all this deception? Dr. Chen stopped at a window overlooking the main lab. Because he learned something about Marcus that changed everything. Would you like to know what it was? I nodded, though part of me was afraid to hear it. 15 years ago, your father was going to retire early. He was going to hand everything over to Marcus and spend time with you and your mother. But then your mother got sick, and while she was dying, Marcus did something unforgivable. What did he do? He tried to get her to sign over her shares in the company while she was on morphine. He told her it was for tax purposes, but really, he was trying to consolidate power. Your father caught him in her hospital room with the papers, pen in her hand, while she was barely conscious. I felt sick. Mom had been so vulnerable those last weeks, in so much pain. The thought of Marcus exploiting that's when your father realized what Marcus really was. But by then, Marcus was too entrenched in the company, too visible. To remove him would have meant destroying everything. So your father decided to play a different game, a longer game. And I was the secret weapon. You were the future he was building toward. Every cold shoulder, every missed birthday, every moment of neglect. It was killing him, Emily, but he knew if Marcus suspected for even a moment that you were a threat, he'd destroy you, just like he's destroyed others. Dr. Chen handed me a tablet. On it were financial projections, patent filings, contract negotiations, the entire future of Novatech Industries. In 6 months, she continued, we announce the patents. We file will invalidate 3 of the major technologies your brother's companies depend on. The contracts we've already secured will take their biggest clients, and the innovations we release will make their entire business model obsolete. It's corporate murder, I whispered. It's justice, she corrected. Your father documented every illegal thing Marcus has done, every bribe, every threat, every destroyed career. It's all in the safety deposit box. But he didn't want to just expose Marcus. He wanted to give you the choice of what to do with that information. I spent the next 3 hours in that warehouse, learning about the empire my father had built in secret. Not just Novatech, but a dozen other companies, all hidden, all waiting. Real estate holdings in 7 countries, patent portfolios that would reshape entire industries. And all of it, every penny, in my name. Mr. Whitman met me at the bank. The safety deposit box was larger than I'd expected and packed with documents, drives, and photographs. But on top of everything was a letter in different handwriting, older, more formal. My dear Emily, it began. Though we've never properly met, I've watched you from afar. I am your grandfather, William Hartwell, and by the time you read this, I'll be long gone. But my legacy, our family's true legacy, lives on in you. The letter explained everything. How he'd built the family fortune not through ruthlessness, but through patience and innovation. How he'd watched his son, my father, struggle to balance ambition with integrity. How he'd seen Marcus born and recognized something dark in him even as a child. But then you came along, the letter continued. And when I held you that one time, when you were just 2 years old, you looked at me with such clarity, such depth, that I knew. I knew you were the one who would understand that true power isn't in what you take, but in what you create. Not in who you destroy, but in who you elevate. I made your father promise to protect you, even if it meant letting you think you were unloved. It was cruel, but necessary. Marcus inherited my son's ambition, but none of his conscience. You inherited both, plus something more. Your mother's artist's soul. That combination makes you dangerous in the best possible way. The chess set was mine, and my father's before me. It's been waiting for you. Inside the White King's compartment, beneath the key you've already found, there's something else. Look again. I pulled out the White King, opened it, and found a hidden bottom. Inside was a ring, not expensive looking, just a simple band with an inscription. The best move is often the one nobody sees coming. The rest of the safety deposit box was a prosecutor's dream. Videos of Marcus bribing officials, emails discussing illegal stock manipulation, documents showing he'd been embezzling from the company for years, hiding it in offshore accounts he thought were secret. But Dad had known about all of it. There was also a drive labeled, "For Emily, the truth about Mom." I plugged it into Mr. Whitman's laptop. It was security footage from the hospital, showing exactly what Dr. Chen had described. Marcus with the papers, Mom barely conscious, Dad walking in, and the confrontation that followed. But the audio was what broke me. "She's dying anyway," Marcus had said. "What does it matter?" "She's your mother," Dad had replied, his voice deadly quiet. "She's an obstacle, just like Emily will be someday if you're not careful. You should have stopped at one kid, Dad. The spare is just a drain on resources." That's when Dad had thrown him out. But Marcus had laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You need me. The board knows me. The clients trust me. You can't run this empire without me, and we both know it." The video ended with Dad standing by Mom's bedside, holding her hand, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but I promise you, Emily will get everything, everything." I sat in that bank vault, surrounded by evidence of my brother's crimes and my father's love, and I cried. Not from sadness this time, but from understanding. Every cold moment, every missed recital, every family dinner where I was ignored, it had all been an act, a performance to keep me safe. Mr. Whitman handed me a tissue. "Your father loved you more than you can imagine." Every time he had to ignore you, he'd come to my office afterward, sometimes in tears. "Am I doing the right thing?" he'd ask. "Am I protecting her or just breaking her?" I always told him the same thing. "She's stronger than you think. She'll understand when the time comes." And do I understand? That's for you to decide. But you have choices to make now. What do you do with Marcus? Do you expose him immediately? Let him fail naturally when his stocks crash? Or you could offer him a chance at redemption. Your father left that choice to you. I laughed, but it was bitter. Redemption? He tried to steal from our dying mother. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying you could. Your father believed in justice, but he also believed in mercy. The choice is yours. I spent the next week going through everything. The companies, the contracts, the patents, the evidence. I met with Dr. Chen daily, learning about technologies I'd never dreamed existed. I visited properties I owned without knowing it. Buildings generating millions in rent, land being developed for projects that would reshape cities. And through it all, Marcus kept calling. Not out of concern, but because the chess set was driving him crazy. I know there's something special about it, he said during one call. Dad wouldn't have left you just that. What aren't you telling me? It has sentimental value, I repeated. Bullshit. I'll give you $100,000. No, $250,000. Marcus, stop. Everything has a price, Emily. $500,000. Final offer. Some things aren't for sale. He'd hung up on me that time, but I could hear the frustration in his voice. He knew something was off, but he couldn't figure out what. Patricia called next, trying a different approach. Emily, sweetheart, Marcus is just concerned about you. We want to make sure you're taken care of. Why don't you come to dinner on Sunday? We can discuss your future. I agreed, but only because I wanted to see them one more time before everything changed. That Sunday dinner was surreal. I sat in the same chair I'd always sat in, at the same table where I'd been invisible for years, but this time I knew the truth. Marcus dominated the conversation as always, talking about his plans for the companies, how he was going to expand, acquire, dominate. Dad was too conservative, he said, cutting into his steak with violent precision. Too sentimental. I'm already in talks to sell off the weaker subsidiaries, streamline operations. I'll double the portfolio's value in 2 years. What about the employees? I asked quietly. He looked at me like I'd asked about the furniture. What about them? The weak get cut. That's business. Is that what Dad would have wanted? Dad's dead, Marcus said bluntly. It's my empire now. Patricia smiled her perfect smile. Marcus is brilliant at this, Emily. You should see him in action. He's already identified millions in unnecessary expenses. Like employee pensions, Marcus added proudly, and healthcare benefits, and all that charity nonsense Dad was always throwing money at. I looked at them, really looked at them. Marcus, so confident in his stolen throne. Patricia, already planning how to spend money that would evaporate within months. They had no idea they were already falling. About the chess set, Marcus said suddenly. I've been thinking. If it means that much to you, keep it. But I want to know why Dad gave it to you. There has to be a reason. Maybe he just wanted me to have something of his, I said. Dad didn't do sentiment, Marcus scoffed. Everything was calculated with him. Everything had a purpose. Maybe I was the purpose, I said quietly. Marcus laughed. You? Emily, no offense, but you were barely a footnote in Dad's life. He probably gave you the chess set because it was the only thing in his office worth less than the cost of including you in the real will. I stood up. I should go. Already? You barely touched your food. I'm not very hungry. As I was leaving, Patricia called out, Oh, Emily, I meant to ask, how are you managing? Financially, I mean. That gallery job can't pay much. I'm managing, I said. Well, if you need help, you could always sell that chess set to a collector. I'm sure someone would pay a few thousand for it. I'll keep that in mind. Marcus walked me to the door, and for a moment, just a moment, he looked like the brother I'd once idolized. Emily, I know things have been different between us, but we're family, the only family we have left. We are, I agreed. So if you need anything, I'll let you know. He smiled, that confident, condescending smile I'd seen 1,000 times. Good. And Emily? Don't wait too long to be practical about that chess set. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. As I drove away, I thought about mercy, about redemption, about second chances. And I thought about Mom in that hospital bed, dying and vulnerable, while Marcus tried to steal from her. The next morning, I made my decision. I called Mr. Whitman. I want to give him one chance, just one, to do the right thing. What did you have in mind? I explained my plan. Mr. Whitman listened, then said, "Your father would be proud. It's more than Marcus deserves, but it's exactly what Richard would have done." The trap was simple. I had Mr. Whitman approach Marcus through a third party, offering to buy one of his companies, the smallest one, worth about $2 million. But the offer came with a condition. Marcus had to rehire the 50 employees he'd just fired and restore their pensions. "Why would I do that?" Marcus had apparently responded. "That would cost me $500,000. Because," the intermediary explained, "the buyer has a moral stance about employee treatment. Take it or leave it." Marcus left it. Of course he did. He even bragged about it to me during our next call. "Some bleeding heart investor wanted me to waste money on fired employees. Can you believe it? As if their problems are my responsibility." "They worked for Dad for years," I pointed out. "And now they don't. That's business, Emily. You wouldn't understand." That's when I knew there would be no redemption, no mercy. Marcus was exactly who Dad knew he was. "You're right," I said. "I wouldn't understand." 2 weeks later, the first domino fell. One of Marcus's major clients quietly transferred their contract to a competitor owned by one of my shell companies. Marcus didn't even notice at first. He was too busy planning his expansion. Then the second domino, a patent that one of his companies depended on, was challenged in court. The challenger? Another company I owned through a trust. The patent was invalidated within days. Apparently, there had been prior art that somehow nobody had noticed before. By the third week, Marcus was starting to panic. 3 more clients gone, 2 more patents challenged. A major supplier suddenly raising prices by 300% because their exclusive contract had a loophole nobody had seen. He called me, frantic. "Something's happening. Someone's attacking the companies." "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting in my new office at Novatech, looking out at the city skyline. "Competitors are coming out of nowhere. Contracts are falling apart. It's like someone knows exactly where we're vulnerable. Maybe it's just bad luck." "This isn't luck," he shouted. "This is coordinated. This is corporate warfare. What are you going to do? Fight back, find out who's behind this and destroy them." But he couldn't fight what he couldn't see. Every move he made, I was 3 moves ahead. Every strategy he tried, I'd already countered, because I'd been watching him for years, learning his patterns, understanding his weaknesses, and because Dad had given me the ultimate advantage, Marcus didn't even know I was playing. The stock started dropping, first a little, then a lot. $14 million became $10 million, then $8 million, then $5 million. Marcus was hemorrhaging money and he couldn't stop it. He tried everything. He hired investigators to find out who was attacking him. They found nothing. Mr. Whitman had made sure of that. He tried to sell some of the companies to cut his losses, but nobody wanted them, not with all the problems they were having. He even tried to get loans to shore up his position, but the banks had mysteriously lost confidence in him. Meanwhile, my empire was growing. Every client Marcus lost, I gained. Every patent he couldn't defend, I acquired. Every innovation his companies had been working on, my people had already perfected and were ready to release. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The final board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday. Marcus had called it himself, desperate to convince the board to support him, to give him more time, more money, more anything. He didn't know that I'd bought enough shares through various proxies to have a controlling interest. He didn't know that half the board members were already working with me. I arrived at the meeting 5 minutes late, carrying the mahogany chess set. "Emily?" Marcus stared at me in confusion. "What are you doing here?" "I'm a shareholder," I said simply, taking a seat at the table. "You don't own any shares." Actually, Mr. Whitman said, entering behind me, she owns 51%. The room erupted. Marcus was on his feet, face red, veins bulging. That's impossible. Those shares were in Dad's name. No, Mr. Whitman corrected, pulling out documentation. They were in various trusts and shell companies, all of which were transferred to Emily upon your father's death. She's been the majority shareholder for 3 months. But the will, I got the stocks. You got stocks, I said quietly, just not the ones that mattered. I set the chess set on the table, began setting up the pieces. Do you know why Dad gave me this, Marcus? I don't care about the fucking chess set. You should, because it's worth more than your entire portfolio now. I opened the white king, pulled out one of the keys. This opens a safety deposit box. Inside is evidence of every crime you've committed in the last 5 years. Embezzlement, bribery, fraud. Marcus had gone pale. You're lying. The bishop, I continued, opening it, contains routing numbers for accounts worth 300 million. Money Dad hid from you because he knew what you'd do with it. This is insane. The Queen has the deed to properties worth another $200 million. The Rooks have patents that will revolutionize the tech industry. And the pawns? I opened one, pulled out the tiny photograph. The pawns have pictures of facilities you never knew existed, companies Dad built in secret, all waiting for this moment. What moment? Marcus whispered. Checkmate, I said simply. Mr. Whitman distributed the folders he'd brought. Inside were 2 options for Marcus. Option 1, resign immediately, quietly, and walk away with $1 million, enough to start over somewhere else. Option 2, stay and fight, and I release everything to the authorities. The embezzlement alone would get him 10 years. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice was weak. I'm your brother. You tried to steal from our dying mother, I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. You fired 50 people who'd worked for Dad for decades, just to save money you were spending on a yacht. You've destroyed careers, ruined lives, all for a few more dollars you didn't even need. That's business. No, that's cruelty. And Dad knew it. He saw what you were, Marcus. That's why he did all this. Not to punish you, but to protect everyone else from you. Patricia finally found her voice. This is illegal. We'll sue. Go ahead, Mr. Whitman said. Everything was done legally. Every contract, every transfer, every acquisition. Your husband might be a criminal, but Emily and her father were just better at the game. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. Not as my brilliant older brother, not as Dad's chosen heir, but as what he really was, a small, greedy man who'd confused cruelty for strength. You have 48 hours to decide, I said, standing up. But know this, if you choose to fight, I won't just beat you. I'll destroy you. Every crime will be exposed. Every victim will be compensated. And you'll spend the next decade in federal prison. You wouldn't. Try me. I started packing up the chess set piece by piece, each one holding secrets Marcus was only beginning to understand. As I picked up the last pawn, I remembered something Dad had written in his journal. Dad left you a message, I said. In his journal. He said, Marcus was given everything and learned nothing. Emily was given nothing and learned everything. The empire was never about the money. It was about what you do with it. And Emily, unlike you, understands that. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Marcus? Those 50 employees you fired? I hired them all. They start Monday at Novatech Industries. Same positions, better pay, full benefits. Dad would have wanted that. The last thing I saw before the door closed was Marcus slumping in his chair, Patricia standing behind him with her hand on his shoulder, both of them staring at the chessboard I'd left. Behind. Every piece was in its proper place, except the white king, which I'd taken with me. Because the king wasn't just a piece, it was a symbol. And symbols, like empires, only have the power we give them. Marcus took option 1. Of course he did. When faced with the choice between fighting and running, he'd always been a coward at heart. He signed the papers, took his $1 million, and disappeared. Last I heard, he was in Costa Rica trying to start an import-export business. Patricia divorced him within a month and tried to claim she'd been manipulated, but the prenup held. Novatech Industries went public 6 months later. The IPO was the largest in tech history. We didn't just revolutionize the industry. We redefined it. Every innovation Dad had been secretly developing, every breakthrough Marcus had been too short-sighted to see, all of it came together in a symphony of progress. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was in the details. The 50 employees Marcus had fired became the core of my leadership team. They knew the business, understood the vision, and most importantly, they remembered kindness. The charities Dad had supported, the ones Marcus had planned to cut off, received double their usual donations. The art gallery where I'd worked received an anonymous donation that allowed them to expand, to showcase unknown artists, to become a beacon for creators who, like me, had been overlooked. And the chess set? It sits in my office now, in the CEO suite of the building Dad bought 20 years ago. Sometimes I still find new compartments, new secrets. Last week, I discovered a hidden spring in the Queen's crown that opened to reveal a picture. Dad and me, from that one time we played chess when I was 16. On the back, in his handwriting, the day I knew. Mr. Whitman, who's now my closest advisor, asked me once if I ever regretted how things happened, if I wished Dad had just been honest from the beginning. No, I told him, because then I wouldn't have learned the most important lesson. Which is, that power isn't about what people see. It's about what they don't see. Marcus saw the empire and thought that was power. But the real power was in the shadows, in the quiet moves, in the patient building of something better. Your grandfather would be proud, Mr. Whitman said. My father too, I hope. He is, Mr. Whitman assured me. I know he is. There's an epilogue to this story, something that happened just last month that put everything in perspective. I received a letter, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Marcus. Emily, it read. I've had time to think, to really think, and I understand now what Dad was trying to teach us. You were never the forgotten child. I was. He forgot to teach me what mattered. He gave me everything except wisdom, while he gave you nothing except the chance to earn it. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I finally understand the last move. It wasn't just checkmate. It was a lesson. The king isn't powerful because of what it can take, but because of what it protects. You protected what mattered. I only tried to take more. I'm teaching English here now, to kids who have nothing. It pays almost nothing, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm building something instead of destroying it. Maybe that's my penance, or maybe it's my first real move in a game I'm finally learning to play. Take care of the empire, but more importantly, take care of the people. That's what Dad really left you, not the money, not the companies, but the responsibility to be better than we were. Your brother, if I can still call myself that, Marcus. P.S. I finally understand why he gave you the chess set. It was never about the secrets inside. It was about what it represented. In chess, you have to see the whole board, think multiple moves ahead, and sometimes sacrifice your most powerful pieces to protect what matters. You learned that. I never did. Until now. I keep that letter in the White King's compartment, alongside Dad's picture and grandfather's ring. Because Marcus was right about one thing. It was never about the secrets inside the chess set. It was about the secret Dad saw inside me, the one he protected and nurtured through neglect that was actually love, through coldness that was actually protection, through a game so long and complex that even now, I'm still discovering new moves he'd planned. The empire is thriving. The technology we're developing will help millions. The wealth is being used to build, not destroy. And somewhere, in a small town in Costa Rica, my brother is finally learning what our father tried to teach him all along, that true power isn't in what you inherit, but in what you do with it. As for me, I still go to the gallery sometimes, not as the owner, though I did buy it, but as an artist. I paint. I create. Because that's what Dad really left me. Not just an empire, but the freedom to be both powerful and creative, strategic and compassionate, visible and invisible as needed. The chess set taught me that every piece has a purpose, every move has a consequence, and sometimes the most powerful position is the one nobody sees coming. Dad knew that. Grandfather knew that. And now, finally, I know it too. But the most important lesson? The one that makes everything else worthwhile. Love doesn't always look like love. Sometimes it looks like coldness that's actually protection. Sometimes it looks like neglect that's actually strategy. Sometimes it looks like a chess set worth $14 million in secrets, when everyone else thinks it's worth nothing at all. And sometimes, just sometimes, the child who was forgotten was actually the one who was remembered most of all. End.